Why nobody wanted to be the first man out of the trench. The cold reaches you long before the morning does. You stand inside a British frontline trench on the Western Front during the First World War. It is sometime before dawn, and the sky has not yet decided whether to remain night or become morning. So before you get comfortable, take a moment, like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The walls around you are built from packed earth, timber supports, and thousands of sandbags that have absorbed months of rain. Beneath your boots, duckboards float uneasily above thick mud. Every step produces a quiet creak, followed by the slow sound of water finding its way back into place. You pull your wool greatcoat tighter around your shoulders. It feels permanently damp. Almost every uniform here does. Dry clothing is a rare luxury after weeks in the trenches. Nothing appears to be happening. Yet hundreds of men are already awake. A cook farther behind the lines prepares tea over a small field stove. Engineers quietly inspect damaged sections of trench wall that collapsed during the night. Signallers check telephone wires connecting the battalion headquarters with artillery batteries farther back. Medical orderlies refill stretchers and inspect bandages, hoping they will not be needed before sunset. War depends upon these ordinary routines far more than many people realize. Long before an attack begins, thousands of unseen tasks must already be complete. The rifle in your hands received careful cleaning last evening. Your boots were inspected for signs of trench foot. Your gas mask hangs ready across your chest, although no one expects gas this morning. Every pocket contains exactly what regulations require, because forgetting even a simple item could become dangerous later. The officers walk quietly along the trench. There are no dramatic speeches. Instead, they compare watches, review maps, and speak in calm voices. Each platoon already knows its objective. Every soldier understands roughly where he is expected to go once the whistles finally sound. For now, there is only waiting. The artillery bombardment that echoed through the night has finally stopped. The silence almost feels louder than the shells themselves. Across no man's land, hidden by darkness and morning mist, German soldiers are likely doing exactly the same things. They are checking equipment, warming cold hands, and waiting for daylight with thoughts that probably resemble your own. It is one of history's quieter ironies that ordinary men on both sides often lived nearly identical mornings. A soldier beside you removes a folded photograph from his pocket for only a moment before placing it safely back inside his tunic. No one comments. Such rituals are common here. The first pale light begins to appear above the horizon. Ladders rest against the parapet. The whistles have not blown. For a few precious minutes more, the trench remains a place of routine instead of movement, of preparation instead of uncertainty. And perhaps the greatest burden is not climbing into the unknown, but standing perfectly still while knowing that the moment is drawing steadily closer. The sky grows brighter by slow degrees. Mist hangs over no man's land, softening the outlines of broken trees and shattered wire. In the distance, shell craters have filled with rainwater that reflects the faint morning light. What was once farmland now resembles an uneven sea of mud and silence. You continue waiting. It is surprising how much of military life is spent doing exactly that. Historians estimate that soldiers serving on the Western Front spent only a small portion of their service in direct combat. Most days were devoted to maintenance, repairs, carrying supplies, standing watch, and preparing for events that might never happen. Behind the trenches, an enormous system works without pause. Horse-drawn wagons deliver ammunition under cover of darkness. Narrow-gauge railways bring timber, coal, food, and medical supplies from depots many kilometers away. Working parties spend entire nights filling sandbags, repairing duckboards, and reinforcing trench walls damaged by rain. None of these jobs appear in famous paintings, yet without them, the front line could not exist. Breakfast this morning is simple: a mug of hot tea if you're fortunate, a piece of hard biscuit, perhaps a serving of bully beef from a familiar tin. It is hardly memorable food, but calories matter more than taste. A soldier carrying rifle, ammunition, shovel, water, helmet, and equipment may already be supporting nearly 30 kilograms before taking a single step. Nearby, a corporal quietly checks each man's gear. Loose straps are tightened, helmets adjusted, bayonets secured. Routine inspections create confidence. When uncertainty fills the future, familiar habits provide a surprising sense of order. Letters from home occupy many thoughts. Britain's military postal service delivers millions of letters throughout the war. Families send newspapers, socks, tobacco, cakes, and simple words of encouragement. Some letters arrive weeks late, yet they remain precious reminders that ordinary life continues somewhere beyond the trenches. You hear only small sounds, water dripping from sandbags, boots shifting on duckboards, a distant horse, someone quietly coughing. These peaceful noises are easily forgotten when history remembers only artillery and explosions. But veterans often wrote about moments exactly like this. They remembered waiting, watching, listening. The battlefield was not constantly filled with violence. Sometimes it was filled only with time. Time to notice every detail. Time to wonder what lay beyond the morning mist. Time to think about home. The officers glanced toward their watches again. Schedules matter. Artillery plans depend upon precise timing. Infantry movements depend upon artillery. Every minute has already been calculated. Still, real life rarely follows perfect plans. The whistles remain silent. You realize that waiting has become its own kind of labor. Every passing minute feels longer than the one before it. Perhaps this is why the first step over the parapet frightened so many soldiers, not because it was sudden, but because it finally ended the long, quiet uncertainty that had settled over everyone like the morning fog. The whistles finally sound, not loudly, not dramatically, just a short, sharp note carried along the trench. Almost immediately, movement begins. The ladders that had rested silently against the parapet all morning are lifted into place. Men climb carefully, one after another, burdened by heavy equipment and months of training compressed into a single routine movement. No one rushes. The attack follows carefully practiced timing. Artillery shells continue falling farther ahead, forming what military planners call a creeping barrage. The intention is simple. The explosions advance slowly across the battlefield while infantry follows behind, using the curtain of shell fire as temporary protection. In reality, every advance unfolds differently. Mud slows progress. Wire sometimes remains uncut. Smoke hides landmarks. Yet every soldier understands that hesitation can disrupt the carefully organized formation. You climb from the trench. For the first time all morning, the landscape opens before you. The ground is uneven beyond anything imagined by those who have never seen a battlefield. Shell holes overlap one another across fields that once produced wheat. Broken wagons lie half buried beneath mud. Fragments of shattered trees stand like black posts against the pale sky. It is strangely quiet. The steady rhythm of boots becomes almost more noticeable than anything else. Many veterans later recalled this surprising calm during the opening moments of an advance. Memory often preserved the feeling of walking more clearly than the sounds surrounding it. The first man out of the trench carried more than his own equipment. He carried uncertainty for everyone following behind. If hidden wire remained, he would discover it first. If shell holes concealed danger, he would meet it first. If the route proved passable, those behind would benefit from his courage. That simple reality explains the title remembered by so many soldiers. Nobody wanted to be the first man out, not because others lacked bravery, but because the unknown always belonged to whoever stepped forward first. When historians study the First World War today, they often examine strategies, generals, and political decisions. Yet the war was also built from countless ordinary mornings like this one. Morning inspections, carefully cleaned rifles, fresh socks, warm tea, quiet conversations, maps folded inside damp pockets. These small routines sustained armies for years. Long after the guns fell silent in November 1918, many veterans remembered the ordinary details more vividly than the battles themselves. The smell of wet earth, the weight of a pack, the comfort of familiar voices before dawn. Perhaps history is preserved not only by great victories, but by humble routines repeated faithfully under impossible circumstances. And as daylight spreads across the scarred fields of the Western Front, you cannot help but wonder whether the quiet moments before history changes are in the end the moments that reveal the greatest measure of ordinary human courage. The first thing you notice is not the danger, it is the mud. It covers everything. Your boots disappear into it with each careful step along the duckboards. The sandbags are stained with it. Wooden support beams wear a permanent brown coating, and even the pages of your pocket notebook carry small fingerprints left by damp hands that have long since accepted there is no such thing as clean. You are serving in a British trench near Ypres in Belgium during the winter of 1917. Rain has fallen for days. The low-lying ground struggles to drain naturally, and the constant shelling has destroyed many of the ditches and streams that once carried water away. Every shell crater becomes a small pond. Every trench slowly fills from below as groundwater pushes upward through the clay. Keeping the trench usable has become almost as important as defending it. Each morning begins with maintenance. Working parties replace damaged duckboards so soldiers have somewhere to walk above the water. Engineers reinforce collapsing walls with timber carried forward during the night. Pumps work continuously, removing water one bucket at a time. It is slow, exhausting labor that receives little attention in history books but determines whether an entire company can continue occupying its position. Your boots receive careful attention. Officers insist that every soldier remove them whenever conditions allow. Socks are dried near small braziers or exchanged for fresh pairs delivered by supply wagons. Medical officers examine swollen feet for the first signs of trench foot, a painful condition caused by prolonged exposure to cold and moisture. Many soldiers considered dry socks more valuable than fresh uniforms. It is an ordinary detail, yet it saved countless men from permanent injury. Around midday, the trench settles into a familiar rhythm. One man cleans his rifle. Another repairs torn webbing with heavy thread. A signaller checks telephone lines after overnight shell fire. Farther down the trench, a cook warms tea in blackened kettles whose handles have been repaired several times over. These small routines repeat day after day. War, at least here, is built upon repetition. Beyond the parapet, the battlefield remains quiet. Only distant artillery reminds you that thousands of soldiers occupy similar trenches stretching across hundreds of kilometers. The world has become remarkably small. A few hundred meters of trench, a narrow sleeping dugout, a mug of tea, a pair of dry socks. Sometimes survival depends more upon these simple comforts than upon courage itself. As evening approaches, another inspection begins. Not because anyone expects excitement tonight, but because in the trenches, ordinary preparation is the foundation of extraordinary endurance. Night arrives early during the winter. Lanterns remain carefully shaded to avoid attracting attention from enemy observers. Voices grow softer. Even footsteps become slower along the slippery duckboards. The trench seems almost peaceful. Inside a timber dugout, perhaps 8 men share a space built for half that number. The roof consists of thick logs covered with earth and sandbags. It is cramped, damp, and carries the constant smell of wet wool, tobacco smoke, and burning candles. Yet compared with standing outside in freezing rain, it feels almost luxurious. Someone quietly brews another kettle of tea. It is difficult to overstate how important tea became for British soldiers during the First World War. It provided warmth, familiarity, and a brief reminder of home. Diaries frequently mention tea far more often than medals or victories. Nearby, another soldier carefully reads a letter received only yesterday. The paper has already become soft from moisture. The handwriting speaks of ordinary things. Children learning to read. A neighbour repairing a fence. The family dog chasing chickens across the yard. These stories seem wonderfully distant from the trench, yet they help preserve a connection to normal life. Entertainment remains simple. Some men play cards, others quietly sing songs learned years before enlistment. If conditions are calm, someone may produce a mouth organ from his pocket, filling the dugout with gentle music that echoes softly against the timber walls. Even laughter survives here, not because war is amusing, but because humour becomes another form of resilience. Outside, sentries continue watching the darkness. Every few hours, fresh soldiers replace them. Standing motionless in freezing temperatures demands concentration. The greatest enemy during these shifts is often exhaustion rather than combat. The routine rarely changes. Watch, listen, report, wait. These 4 tasks define much of trench life. The newspapers back home often describe battles. The soldiers remember maintenance, waiting, tea, letters, friendship. As midnight approaches, rain begins once more. You listen to the drops striking sandbags above the dugout roof. The sound becomes almost hypnotic. It reminds you that nature continues its quiet work regardless of human conflict. And perhaps that steady rhythm of rain offered one of the few moments when the battlefield briefly resembled the ordinary world left behind. Another morning arrives. The landscape looks almost identical to yesterday. Fresh rain has erased many footprints along the duckboards. Engineers begin repairing damage before breakfast. Supply parties emerge from communication trenches carrying ammunition, bread, coal, and medical stores packed carefully inside canvas sacks. The front survives because ordinary work never stops. Historians sometimes describe trench warfare as static. For the men living inside it, nothing could be further from the truth. Every day required rebuilding, strengthening, cleaning, replacing. Nothing remained finished for long. The trench itself behaved almost like a living thing, constantly changing under the pressure of weather and time. Medical officers continue inspecting feet. Weapons receive another cleaning. Water pumps work without pause. Even the simplest task contributes to survival. Months later, many soldiers struggle to remember exact dates. Instead, they remember sensations. The weight of soaked boots, steam rising from hot tea on a cold morning, the welcome sight of fresh bread arriving after several days of preserved rations, the smell of timber inside a dugout after rain. These memories remain surprisingly vivid. When the war finally ended in November 1918, millions of soldiers returned home carrying experiences that few civilians could fully understand. Many spoke very little about combat. Instead, they remembered friendships formed while repairing trench walls, the quiet conversations during night watches, the shared effort of keeping one another healthy through endless weeks of mud and cold. Modern visitors walking preserved sections of the Western Front often imagine dramatic battles. Yet, the greatest lesson hidden beneath those peaceful fields is something quieter. Entire armies survived because ordinary people performed ordinary tasks with extraordinary consistency. One soldier dried another's socks. Another repaired a damaged duckboard. Someone carried tea through the rain. Someone filled another sandbag. History rarely remembers their names, but history could not have unfolded without them. As you look across the quiet trench one final time, it becomes clear that the greatest challenge was never simply enduring a single battle. It was waking every morning prepared to repeat the same difficult routines again, trusting that each small act of care might carry both yourself and the men beside you safely into another dawn. Perhaps resilience is not found in extraordinary moments at all. Perhaps it lives quietly inside ordinary habits, repeated faithfully, even when the world around them seems determined to fall apart. The battlefield changes when the sun disappears. During daylight, movement along the front is limited. Enemy observers, positioned on higher ground or hidden inside reinforced observation posts, watch constantly through binoculars and periscopes. Even a single figure standing above the parapet can attract rifle fire or artillery. Night changes those rules. As darkness settles over the Western Front in 1916, the trenches become unexpectedly busy. The moon has not yet risen, leaving the shattered landscape covered by deep shadows. Lamps remain carefully shielded, voices stay low, every unnecessary sound is avoided. You tighten the strap of your steel helmet and wait beside a narrow communication trench. Tonight, your platoon has been assigned to a routine night patrol. These patrols were among the most important and most demanding tasks carried out by infantry units. Their purpose was rarely dramatic. Most patrols gathered information rather than seeking combat. Soldiers checked whether enemy barbed wire had been repaired, listened for digging that might indicate a new trench, confirmed landmarks after recent shelling, or searched for safe routes that could be used during future operations. Before leaving, the patrol commander quietly reviews the plan one final time. No written orders are carried unless absolutely necessary. If a patrol member is captured, even a simple map could provide valuable intelligence. Instead, each soldier memorizes distances, landmarks, and signals. The equipment you carry is deliberately light: a rifle, a bayonet, a few extra rounds of ammunition. wire cutters, a water bottle, sometimes a small compass. Heavy packs remain behind. Silence is more valuable than extra supplies. One by one, the patrol climbs through a narrow gap in the trench parapet. No man's land stretches ahead, hidden beneath darkness. The ground feels unfamiliar, even though it lies only a short distance from your own trench. Weeks of shell fire have transformed fields into uneven ground filled with craters, broken timber, twisted wire, and abandoned equipment. Every step must be placed carefully. The patrol advances slowly. No one speaks. Communication happens through gentle taps on a shoulder or simple hand signals learned during training. Occasionally, everyone freezes, not because something has happened, but because listening is often more useful than moving. Far away, an owl calls from a surviving stand of trees. Somewhere beyond the darkness, engineers can be heard repairing damaged wire. The sound carries surprisingly far during still nights. Military manuals advised patrols to pause frequently and simply listen. A shovel striking earth, a hammer against timber, the clink of wire. These ordinary sounds often revealed more about enemy activity than direct observation. Patience becomes the patrol's greatest skill. You begin to understand why experienced soldiers described night duty as mentally exhausting. Hours pass with only a few hundred meters covered. The darkness conceals danger, but it also conceals certainty. Every shadow invites another careful look. Every sound raises another quiet question. And perhaps the longest journey of the night is not measured in distance at all, but in the steady discipline required to move slowly through uncertainty without allowing fear to disturb the silence. The deeper you move into no man's land, the more the battlefield seems to disappear. Without daylight, familiar landmarks lose their shape. A shattered tree resembles a soldier standing motionless. A shell crater becomes impossible to judge until your boot nearly slips into it. The landscape demands complete attention. The patrol halts once again. Everyone kneels. No one speaks. For several minutes, the only task is to listen. This quiet discipline formed an essential part of trench warfare. Before modern electronic surveillance, armies depended heavily upon human observation. Night patrols gathered information that aerial photographs could not always provide. They confirmed whether enemy trenches had expanded, whether fresh barbed wire had appeared, or whether unusual sounds suggested tunneling operations beneath the battlefield. Mining was one of the least visible aspects of the First World War. Specialist tunneling companies dug long galleries beneath enemy positions, placing enormous explosive charges beneath trenches before detonating them. Listening posts were established specifically to detect the faint sounds of enemy picks striking underground chalk or clay. Sometimes soldiers spent entire shifts simply listening through the earth. The patrol continues forward. One soldier quietly measures the approximate distance between two damaged sections of wire. Another sketches the position in a small notebook after returning safely to the trench. Memory is trusted, but careful records allow intelligence officers to compare observations gathered over many nights. Routine turns information into strategy. A faint breeze carries the smell of damp earth mixed with cordite. The battlefield remains strangely alive despite its silence. Rats move among abandoned equipment. Foxes occasionally cross no man's land searching for food. Birds, remarkably, still return to some sections where shell fire has grown less frequent. Nature begins reclaiming the landscape even while the war continues. The patrol commander raises a hand. Everyone stops. Far ahead, a small lantern briefly appears before disappearing again. Perhaps an enemy working party. Perhaps engineers inspecting wire. The patrol makes no attempt to investigate. Its purpose tonight is observation, not confrontation. That decision reflects experience rather than caution. Accurate information often proves more valuable than unnecessary risk. Military success depends upon returning with knowledge. Slowly, carefully, the patrol begins retracing its route toward the British trench. The return journey demands just as much concentration as the advance. Footprints made earlier help guide the way. Familiar shell craters become useful landmarks. Every man quietly counts distances in his mind. Hours have passed, very little appears to have happened, yet valuable observations now travel back with the patrol, and sometimes history advances not through dramatic moments, but through patient men who spend an entire night gathering a few carefully remembered details beneath an ordinary sky. The trench comes into view just before first light. From a distance, it appears almost invisible. Only the careful arrangement of sandbags and the faint outline of the parapet separate it from the surrounding earth. A sentry quietly recognizes the patrol's agreed password. One by one, the men climb back inside. No cheers greet their return. Night patrols were routine. Successful patrols often ended exactly this way, with quiet reports rather than celebration. The patrol commander immediately meets the intelligence officer. Every observation is recorded. Locations of damaged wire, sounds heard during the night, fresh footprints, possible repairs to enemy trenches. Even seemingly insignificant details become part of larger operational maps used by battalion headquarters. The information gathered tonight may influence artillery fire several days from now. It may alter the route chosen for a future patrol. It may confirm reports from aerial reconnaissance. Small observations gradually become reliable knowledge. The soldiers themselves return to ordinary duties. Rifles are cleaned once more. Boots are scraped free of heavy mud. Wet socks are exchanged whenever possible. Breakfast soon arrives. Tea, bread, perhaps porridge if supplies allow. The routine resumes almost immediately. There is little time to dwell upon the night's work. Elsewhere along the Western Front, thousands of similar patrols have returned before sunrise. French units, British battalions, Canadian divisions, Australian companies, German infantry, each gathering information, each relying upon patience more than speed. Modern technology has transformed reconnaissance, but the quiet professionalism of these patrols remains remarkable. Success depended not upon dramatic heroism, but upon careful observation, disciplined movement, and mutual trust. Every member relied upon the man ahead to choose safe footing. Every man behind trusted those in front to recognize danger before it spread through the patrol. As daylight gradually brightens the trench once more, yesterday's routine quietly begins again. Repairs, maintenance, letters, tea, watch duty. Another night patrol already appears on tomorrow's schedule. The war continues through countless small tasks repeated faithfully by ordinary people. And perhaps the greatest achievement of those silent patrols was not simply gathering intelligence. It was proving that patience, restraint, and quiet cooperation could shape history just as surely as the loudest battles ever recorded. When the sun finally rises above the battered fields, the darkness leaves almost without notice. Only fresh footprints across no man's land remain, soon to be softened by rain, reminding us that some of the most important journeys in history were completed so quietly that almost no one heard them at all. Before the infantry wakes, another group of soldiers has already been working for hours. They are not preparing rifles. They are carrying shovels. You served with a company of the Royal Engineers on the Western Front in 1917. Unlike the infantry, your battle is often against rain, collapsing earth, and time itself. Every trench must remain standing. If a wall gives way during the night, dozens of soldiers could lose shelter before sunrise. If duckboards sink beneath the mud, movement slows. If drainage channels clog, entire sections of trench become flooded within days. The front line is never truly finished. It is under constant construction. Throughout the night, your work party has hauled heavy timber beams forward from supply dumps hidden several kilometers behind the line. Each beam requires several men to carry it through winding communication trenches, stopping often to avoid exhausting yourselves. The ground is slippery. Boots sink deep into wet clay. Every load feels heavier than the last. The rain has not stopped for nearly 2 days. Water gathers against the trench walls, pressing steadily against sandbags that have already begun to weaken. You and your comrades remove damaged bags one by one, replacing them with fresh ones filled only yesterday. It is slow work, but every completed section makes the trench safer. No medals are awarded for replacing sandbags, yet thousands are replaced every single week. Nearby, another engineer squad repairs a drainage sump using wooden planks and gravel. Small pumps remove groundwater almost continuously. Without them, the trench would become little more than a narrow canal. An infantry officer passes quietly and thanks your team before continuing toward the firing line. It is a brief gesture, but it reminds you that every repaired wall protects someone else's morning. As the first light spreads across the battlefield, You wipe damp soil from your gloves and look along the trench you helped rebuild. The work will likely need repeating tomorrow, but for today, it stands. And sometimes that was enough. The rain finally eases. Not enough to dry the ground, but enough for the engineers to inspect the damage left behind. The trench stretches for hundreds of meters, twisting in sharp angles called traverses. These bends are deliberate. Military engineers learned that straight trenches allowed explosions and machine gun fire to travel much farther. By breaking the trench into short sections, the damage from any single shell could be limited. Almost every feature has a purpose. Duckboards keep boots above standing water. Fire steps allow riflemen to see over the parapet. Revetments made from timber or woven hurdles support the trench walls. Deep dugouts provide shelter during heavy bombardments. Nothing exists by accident. Construction materials arrive mostly at night. Horse-drawn wagons carry timber as close as possible before unloading. From there, engineer working parties move everything by hand to avoid drawing enemy attention. The process repeats almost every evening. A single storm can undo days of labor. You stop beside a damaged duckboard. The timber has split under weeks of constant use. Together, 4 engineers lift it away and fit a replacement into place. It is physically demanding work, yet the routine has become almost automatic after months on the front. Nearby, a carpenter shapes fresh support beams using hand tools. Even in wartime, skilled trades remain essential. Blacksmiths repair metal fittings. Masons reinforce dugout entrances. Electricians maintain lighting systems in larger headquarters. The battlefield depends upon craftsmen as much as soldiers. As afternoon passes, another inspection begins. Measurements are taken. Weak points are marked. Additional sandbags requested. The paperwork may seem ordinary, yet it ensures tomorrow's repair parties know exactly where to begin. War is often remembered through battles. The engineers remember maintenance schedules. And as another cloudy evening approaches, you realize that victory sometimes begins with something as humble as a shovel placed carefully into wet earth. Evening settles quietly across the front. The infantry prepares for another night of sentry duty, while your engineering section gathers its tools. Shovels are cleaned before being returned to storage. Axes receive fresh sharpening. Lengths of wire are carefully coiled for tomorrow's repairs. Nothing is wasted. Supplies remain too valuable. You pause beside a completed stretch of trench, reinforced earlier in the day. The timber sits firmly against the earth. Fresh sandbags line the parapet. Water drains steadily through the newly cleared channel. To someone passing by, it appears completely ordinary. That is precisely the goal. Good engineering attracts little attention. It simply allows everyone else to continue their work. During the First World War, engineers built far more than trenches. They constructed roads capable of supporting heavy artillery, bridges strong enough for supply columns, railway lines bringing ammunition to the front, water systems providing safe drinking supplies, observation posts, signal bunkers, underground headquarters. Entire military operations depended upon their quiet expertise. Historians estimate that millions of sandbags were used along the Western Front. Thousands of kilometers of trench required almost constant maintenance. Weather alone could destroy carefully prepared defenses within days. Without engineers, the front would slowly collapse under its own weight. As darkness returns, another work party quietly takes your place. The cycle never ends. Repair, inspect, strengthen, repeat. Many of the men performing these tasks left no famous diary. Few appeared in wartime newspapers. Yet their labor protected countless soldiers whose names are remembered today. The battlefield often celebrates courage displayed in moments. Engineering celebrates persistence demonstrated every single day. Long after the guns fell silent in 1918, many preserved trenches visited by historians still revealed the remarkable craftsmanship of those forgotten units. Carefully angled walls, drainage systems, timber supports, evidence that even amid destruction, people continued building rather than simply enduring. You shoulder your tools and begin the slow walk toward the reserve area. Behind you, the trench stands ready for another night. Not because it survived on its own, but because ordinary men quietly refused to let it disappear beneath rain and mud. Perhaps history remembers battles because they are dramatic, yet civilizations have always depended just as much upon those willing to repair, rebuild, and strengthen what others rely upon. And as the last light fades across the Western Front, you leave behind something that asks for no recognition, only the quiet satisfaction of knowing tomorrow's soldiers will stand a little safer because of today's unseen work. Long before breakfast reaches the front line, you are already awake. The sky is still dark as you shoulder 2 heavy canvas bags filled with fresh bread. Around you, other soldiers prepare similar loads. Some carry crates of rifle ammunition. Others balance metal containers of hot tea suspended from wooden poles. A few struggle beneath coils of barbed wire or boxes of medical supplies. You are part of a carrying party. It is one of the least celebrated duties of the First World War, yet one of the most essential. Every day, thousands of soldiers moved supplies from railheads and depots to the front line by hand. Motor vehicles could travel only so far before shell damage and deep mud made the roads impassable. Horse-drawn wagons carried loads a little farther, but eventually everything had to be lifted onto human shoulders. The communication trench stretches ahead like a narrow corridor cut into the earth. Unlike the firing trench, it runs away from the enemy, linking reserve positions with the front. It twists constantly to reduce the effects of shell fire. In many places, the walls are so close that 2 men carrying large crates can barely pass each other. You walk carefully over wet duckboards. One misplaced step sends a boot ankle-deep into icy mud. The load feels heavier with every turn. Still, there is little choice but to continue. The men waiting in the front trench depend on these supplies. Breakfast cannot arrive without someone carrying it. Fresh drinking water must be delivered every day. Ammunition boxes weighing more than 20 kilograms each cannot move themselves. As dawn approaches, the trench grows busier. Messengers hurry toward headquarters carrying written reports. Medical orderlies escort tired soldiers returning from night duty. Engineers pass in the opposite direction with shovels and timber. The communication trench resembles a narrow village street before sunrise. Everyone has somewhere to be. Few stop for long. At last, the front line comes into view. The bread is unloaded. The tea remains surprisingly warm. The ammunition is stacked neatly beneath a timber shelter. No one applauds. No one celebrates. Within minutes, another carrying party begins the long journey back to collect the next load. The work is repetitive, quiet, often exhausting. Yet, without these endless walks through the winding trenches, the front line would fall silent within days. Breakfast begins with tea. For many British soldiers, no meal feels complete without it. Large, insulated containers arrive from field kitchens before dawn, carefully carried through communication trenches while the liquid is still hot. Alongside them come fresh loaves of bread, tins of jam, cheese, bully beef, and occasionally bacon when supplies allow. Delivering food is a race against time. Warm meals cool quickly in winter. Fresh bread becomes damp if exposed to rain. Every delay makes the journey more difficult for the soldiers waiting ahead. Behind the lines, field kitchens rarely stop working. Army cooks rise while most others are asleep. Coal fires burn steadily beneath heavy iron stoves. Bread is sliced. Tea is brewed in enormous kettles. Rations are counted carefully to ensure every platoon receives its share. The quantities are astonishing. A single battalion may require thousands of loaves each week, hundreds of kilograms of meat, countless gallons of drinking water, and tons of coal for cooking. Supplying one army becomes a logistical achievement as remarkable as any battlefield victory. Water requires special attention. Unlike food, it cannot simply be gathered from nearby streams. Many rivers and ponds near the front become contaminated by shell fire, damaged drainage systems, and battlefield debris. Engineers establish purification points farther behind the lines. Water is filtered, treated, and transported forward inside metal containers. Every filled container represents another difficult journey along muddy trenches. You help unload several of them before breakfast begins. Nearby, another carrying party distributes fresh mail. Letters arrive almost daily whenever conditions permit. Some soldiers receive newspapers. Others open parcels containing knitted scarves, socks, chocolate, or homemade cakes carefully wrapped by family members. For a few quiet minutes, the trench feels less like a battlefield. Conversations turn toward home, children, harvests, local football matches. Simple memories replace military routines. Then the empty containers are gathered once more. The journey begins again. Food has been delivered. Now more must be collected for tomorrow. The work never truly ends. Perhaps the greatest measure of endurance is not surviving a single difficult day. It is finding the strength to repeat that same journey again before the next sunrise. Evening arrives, but the carrying parties continue. Darkness is often the safest time to move large quantities of supplies. Enemy observers struggle to identify movement. Artillery becomes less accurate. Long columns of soldiers quietly emerge from reserve positions carrying everything the front line will require before dawn. Coal, medical dressings, replacement rifles, machine gun ammunition, fresh uniforms, bundles of timber, boxes of candles. The list seems endless. Each item begins its journey far away. Factories produce it. Railways transport it. Ships cross the English Channel. Depots organize it. Horse wagons move it closer. Finally, carrying parties complete the last and most difficult stage. Military historians often describe logistics as the science of movement. The soldiers carrying supplies understood it as simple necessity. If one night's deliveries failed, tomorrow's routine became much harder. The front line depended upon reliability more than speed. As your final load reaches the trench, the evening ration is already being prepared. Small cooking stoves glow inside sheltered corners. Tin mugs fill with steaming tea. Fresh bread is shared among tired men finishing their day's work. Someone quietly thanks the carrying party before lifting another crate into storage. The words are brief, but they matter. Recognition is uncommon. The work itself provides its own reward. During the First World War, millions of tons of supplies crossed the Western Front through systems built almost entirely upon organization and human endurance. Every successful delivery represented cooperation between cooks, railway workers, engineers, drivers, horse handlers, warehouse clerks, and ordinary infantrymen carrying heavy loads through darkness. History often remembers the front line, yet behind every soldier stood countless others ensuring he had food to eat, water to drink, dry socks to wear, and ammunition when needed. Their journeys rarely appeared in official reports. They earned few decorations. Still, their footsteps shaped the rhythm of the war just as surely as any famous battle. As the stars appear above the quiet trench, you begin the walk back once more. Tomorrow's bread has not yet been baked. Tomorrow's water has not yet been filled. Tomorrow's ammunition still waits in distant supply depots. And before another sunrise arrives, someone will have to carry it all again. Perhaps that is the quiet truth hidden within every great army. Its strength is measured not only by those who stand at the front, but by those who faithfully walk the long road behind them, night after night, asking for nothing more than the chance to complete one more journey before dawn. Long before you see the sunrise, you hear the guns. Not one, not 10, hundreds. Somewhere beyond the horizon, batteries of British artillery begin another carefully planned bombardment. The deep boom of heavy howitzers rolls across the countryside like distant thunder, while lighter field guns answer in a steady rhythm that seems almost mechanical. After weeks at the front, you no longer count individual explosions. Instead, they become part of the landscape. You serve with a British infantry battalion near the Somme during 1916. Tonight, your company occupies the support trench rather than the front line. The firing trench lies only a short walk ahead, but here the atmosphere feels slightly calmer. Slightly. No place near the Western Front is ever completely quiet. The dugout where you spend the night is reinforced with thick timber beams. Candles burn low inside metal holders fixed to the walls. Moisture drips steadily from the roof, collecting in small puddles along the packed earth floor. The sound is almost hypnotic. Drip. Pause. Drip. Between those quiet moments comes another distant rumble as artillery continues its work. Unlike infantry attacks, artillery rarely rests for long. Guns require constant attention. Crews clean barrels, inspect breech mechanisms, stack shells in careful rows, and calculate firing tables using maps, compasses, and mathematical corrections for weather and distance. Every shell fired before dawn has already passed through many careful hands. Inside the dugout, one soldier quietly writes a letter home beneath the weak candlelight. Another repairs a loose button on his tunic. A third carefully oils the bolt of his rifle, even though it was cleaned only yesterday. Routine survives because routine creates calm. No one knows what tomorrow may bring. Everyone knows what must be done tonight. Outside, a sentry walks slowly along the trench. His task is simple: remain awake, observe, report anything unusual. The hours pass gradually. No dramatic events interrupt the darkness. Only the steady conversation between artillery batteries and the distant horizon continues without pause. You begin to understand why so many veterans later described the guns as permanent companions. Eventually, they became less like individual explosions and more like the heartbeat of the front itself. And as midnight quietly slips toward morning, you find yourself listening not for silence, but for the familiar rhythm that reminds you the night is continuing exactly as expected. The clock inside battalion headquarters shows 2 in the morning. Few soldiers need to see it. Most have learned to estimate time by habit alone. The arrival of ration parties, the changing of sentries, the regular firing schedules of nearby artillery batteries. Life at the front follows patterns that repeat day after day. Even the guns develop recognizable voices. Heavy howitzers produce a slow, deep report that echoes for several seconds. Field guns answer with quicker, sharper sounds. Farther away, enemy batteries occasionally respond, creating brief exchanges before the darkness settles once more. Experienced soldiers often guessed which batteries were firing simply by listening. Artillery crews work continuously. After every barrage, the guns require inspection. Barrels become hot. Moving parts must be cleaned. Spent cartridge cases are removed. Fresh ammunition arrives by wagon and narrow-gauge railway before being stacked beneath camouflage nets. Nothing about artillery is simple. A single heavy shell may weigh more than 40 kilograms. Hundreds are needed during even a modest bombardment. Supplying the guns demands remarkable organization. Back inside the support trench, another kettle begins to boil. Tea appears once again. It is served quietly. No one rushes. Warmth matters during long nights. Steam rises gently from tin mugs, while conversations remain soft enough that they never travel beyond the dugout entrance. One soldier remembers working as a schoolteacher before the war. Another speaks briefly about helping his father repair fishing boats. These ordinary memories seem almost more vivid than military life itself, perhaps because they belong to another world. The artillery continues, sometimes faster, sometimes slower, rarely stopping altogether. You notice that no one reacts dramatically anymore. The sounds have become familiar. Human beings possess an extraordinary ability to adapt. Even endless noise eventually becomes part of everyday existence. Outside, the eastern horizon begins to lighten almost imperceptibly. Another night is drawing to its quiet conclusion. The guns continue speaking across the darkness. And somehow, their endless rhythm has become another way of measuring the passage of time itself. The first birds begin singing before sunrise. For a brief moment, their voices mingle with the distant artillery. It is an unexpected reminder that nature continues even amid war. You climb carefully onto the fire step and look toward the horizon. The battlefield remains hidden beneath thin morning mist. Shell craters hold pools of still water reflecting the pale sky. Broken trees stand motionless against the growing light. The guns fire again, then again. Yet daylight continues arriving exactly as it always has. No bombardment has ever delayed the sunrise. The morning routine begins almost immediately. Night sentries are relieved. Breakfast arrives from the rear. Engineers inspect damage caused by overnight shelling. Medical officers conduct another round of health inspections. Messages travel between headquarters and company commanders. The army wakes, not suddenly, gradually, like a village beginning another ordinary working day. Artillery crews clean their guns before preparing fresh ammunition. Infantrymen refill water bottles. Signalers repair damaged telephone lines. Horse teams bring additional supplies toward the batteries. Every task fits into a much larger rhythm. The machinery of war depends less upon moments of excitement than upon thousands of quiet routines performed correctly. Many soldiers later admitted that they remembered these routines more clearly than individual battles. The familiar taste of tea at dawn, the smell of damp timber inside a dugout, the steady rumble of distant guns continuing hour after hour. These became the sounds of daily life. When peace finally returned in 1918, many veterans found silence strangely unfamiliar. For years, the artillery had accompanied every sunrise and every sunset. Its absence felt almost impossible at first. Today, visitors walking the peaceful fields of the Somme often hear only birds, wind, and distant farm machinery. The guns have long since disappeared. The earth has healed. Fields once torn apart by shell fire now produce wheat once more. Yet beneath that quiet countryside remain reminders of countless ordinary nights spent waiting for dawn. Not every soldier remembered great victories. Many remembered simply surviving another long watch beneath a sky that slowly brightened despite everything happening below it. As the sun finally clears the horizon, its light reaches every trench, every dugout, every repaired duckboard, and every tired face preparing for another day. Perhaps that gentle certainty, that morning always arrived no matter how long the night seemed, became one of the greatest comforts available to those who waited patiently beneath the endless conversation of distant guns. The order arrives quietly. There is no cheering, no celebration. A company sergeant major walks carefully along the trench, stopping beside each section commander to pass the same simple message. Prepare for relief. For the first time in several days, your battalion will leave the front line. Another unit is already making its way forward through the communication trenches, ready to take over every firing position, every dugout, and every observation post before dawn. The change must happen silently. Both units occupy the trenches for a short time, ensuring that nothing is left unattended. Machine gun positions are explained, telephone connections are identified, dangerous sections of trench are pointed out. Officers exchange notes about recent enemy activity, damaged duckboards, and the locations of supply stores. The handover is careful rather than hurried. War leaves little room for confusion. You gather your equipment, the rifle that has rested beside you every night, the steel helmet marked with dried mud, the water bottle, entrenching tool, gas mask, and heavy pack that somehow seems heavier than when you first arrived. Nothing has changed, yet everything feels different. The relief column begins moving just after midnight. One file. No talking. Only the slow rhythm of boots against damp duckboards. The communication trench twists through the darkness, disappearing around countless bends. Candles placed inside protected recesses provide just enough light to avoid losing the path. Ahead of you, the soldier in line walks steadily. Behind you, another follows at the same measured pace. No one hurries. After days in the front trench, simply walking away feels unfamiliar. You pass carrying parties moving in the opposite direction. Fresh bread, boxes of ammunition, bundles of timber. The war does not pause simply because your company is leaving. Another unit will soon begin exactly the same routine you have just completed. As the front line slowly disappears behind you, the sound of distant artillery becomes softer, not silent, just farther away. It is enough to remind you that even a short journey can make the world feel slightly larger again. The communication trench eventually opens onto a muddy road behind the lines. For the first time in days, the sky seems wider. The reserve area lies several kilometers away, beyond artillery positions, supply depots, and medical stations that form the hidden machinery supporting the front. The march continues. Horse-drawn wagons pass slowly, their wheels sinking into soft ground. Drivers speak quietly to tired animals that have worked almost without rest since the war began. Nearby, engineers repair shell damage along the road, filling fresh craters before the next convoy arrives. Everything moves with quiet purpose. You pass an artillery battery preparing for another day's firing. Gun crews clean barrels blackened by smoke. Fresh shells are stacked beneath camouflage nets. Mechanics inspect limbers and harnesses while officers compare maps spread across folding tables. Although you are leaving the front line, thousands of others are beginning another day's work. Soon, small signs of ordinary life begin to appear. A field bakery sends the smell of fresh bread drifting across the road. Laundry hangs beside temporary huts whenever the weather allows. Medical orderlies sweep the entrances of dressing stations before the morning rush begins. Someone whistles softly while repairing a wagon wheel. The contrast feels remarkable. Only a short distance separates the reserve area from the trenches. Yet the atmosphere changes completely. The sounds of construction replace the sounds of rifles. The smell of baking bread replaces the smell of damp earth. Conversation becomes easier. Several soldiers finally speak after hours of quiet marching. Most discuss simple things: food, sleep, letters waiting from home. No one feels the need for dramatic stories. The greatest luxury waiting ahead is a dry blanket and an uninterrupted night's rest. As the sun climbs higher, your destination comes into view. Rows of canvas tents, wooden huts, field kitchens already preparing the midday meal. For now, this will be home, not forever. Only until another rotation carries you back toward the front once again. The reserve camp feels almost peaceful. Your first task is not training, it is washing. Large water tanks have been filled for the arriving battalion. Uniforms are brushed clean as thoroughly as possible. Boots receive fresh grease to protect the leather. Socks are exchanged for dry pairs. Medical officers inspect every soldier, paying particular attention to blistered feet and signs of illness. The routine reflects hard-earned experience. An army that neglects rest soon loses strength. After inspection comes breakfast: fresh bread, hot tea, porridge, perhaps a little bacon if supplies have arrived. The meal is simple, yet after days in the front trench, it feels remarkably generous. Later that morning, barbers begin cutting hair beneath open shelters. Quartermasters issue replacement clothing where needed. Rifles receive detailed cleaning before being stored temporarily inside racks. Equipment damaged during the previous rotation is repaired or exchanged. The battalion slowly begins recovering. Training continues during the afternoon. New recruits practice trench signals. Machine gun crews rehearse loading drills. Officers conduct map exercises beneath shaded tents. Even while resting, preparation never truly stops. Everyone understands another journey to the front will come soon enough. In quieter moments, soldiers write letters home. Many describe ordinary details rather than danger. The quality of the food, the weather, a football match organized between companies, the arrival of fresh mail. These everyday experiences help reassure families waiting anxiously across the English Channel. As evening approaches, the camp grows calm. Some men read newspapers, others quietly mend uniforms. A few simply sit outside their tents watching the sunset spread across distant fields. For the first time in many nights, there is no need to stand sentry before midnight. No duckboards beneath your feet. No trench walls pressing closely on either side. Only open sky. The rest will not last forever. Within a few days, another relief order will arrive. The same communication trenches will lead your company back toward the front. The same routines will begin again. Yet these brief pauses matter. They remind every soldier that endurance depends not only upon courage during difficult moments, but also upon the opportunity to recover between them. When historians describe the Western Front, they often focus on battles measured in hours or days. The soldiers themselves frequently remembered something quieter: the slow walk away from the firing line, the first hot meal, the first dry blanket, the first peaceful night's sleep. Perhaps those ordinary comforts became unforgettable precisely because they were temporary. And as darkness settles gently over the reserve camp, You drift towards sleep, knowing that somewhere beyond the distant horizon, another battalion now stands where you stood yesterday, waiting patiently for its own long walk back from the front. When people imagine the First World War, they often imagine noise. They picture endless artillery, machine guns, whistles, explosions rolling across the countryside. Those sounds certainly existed, but the soldiers who lived through the war often remembered something else just as clearly. They remembered the silence. You stand in a British trench on an autumn morning in 1918. The air is cool enough that your breath drifts slowly upward before disappearing into the pale sky. Overnight rain has settled the dust, leaving the earth dark and heavy beneath your boots. Nothing is happening. Not yet. The sentry beside you quietly scans the opposite trench through a periscope. Somewhere behind the lines, a cook prepares breakfast. Farther back still, horses pull supply wagons toward ammunition dumps hidden beneath rows of camouflage netting. The front appears almost peaceful. It is in moments like these that soldiers notice the smallest details. The gentle movement of mist rising from shell craters, a crow landing on the remains of a shattered tree, water dripping steadily from the edge of a sandbag, the faint ticking of a pocket watch. These ordinary sounds fill the spaces between military activity. They become strangely memorable. Many surviving diaries from the Western Front describe long periods where almost nothing happened. Hours passed with only routine inspections, maintenance work, and quiet observation. Soldiers repaired trench walls, cleaned rifles, wrote letters, and waited. Waiting was not empty. It allowed the mind to wander. Thoughts drifted toward home, toward childhood, toward simple routines that now seemed wonderfully distant. The war did not occupy every thought. Sometimes the greatest concern was whether another pair of dry socks would arrive with tomorrow's supplies. Sometimes it was wondering whether the tea would still be warm by the time breakfast reached the trench. The extraordinary often rested upon remarkably ordinary foundations. As the clouds slowly separate overhead, a narrow beam of sunlight reaches the firing step. It lasts only a few moments before disappearing once again. Yet every soldier notices it, perhaps because beauty appears most clearly when life becomes simple enough to observe it, and perhaps silence itself became memorable because it reminded everyone that even the busiest battlefield still belonged to the same quiet world waiting patiently beyond the war. Years after the war ended, veterans gathered to share memories. Many expected conversations to focus upon famous battles. Instead, they often spoke about quieter moments, the smell of fresh bread arriving before dawn, the comfort of hot tea during winter rain, friends talking softly inside crowded dugouts while candles burned low against timber walls. Memory works in unexpected ways. Extraordinary events often become blurred with time. Ordinary routines remain remarkably clear, perhaps because they were repeated so often. Every morning began with inspection. Every evening ended with another watch schedule. Every letter from home carried familiar handwriting. These repeated moments became anchors in lives otherwise shaped by uncertainty. You imagine yourself walking slowly along a preserved section of trench long after the guns have fallen silent. Grass has begun growing where duckboards once rested. Wildflowers appear among old shell craters. Birdsong fills the air once occupied by artillery. Nature reclaims the landscape without hurry. Across France and Belgium today, many former battlefields have become peaceful farmland once again. Farmers harvest wheat from fields where soldiers once repaired trenches. Children ride bicycles along roads once crowded with supply wagons. Church bells ring above villages rebuilt after unimaginable destruction. The transformation reminds us that landscapes possess extraordinary patience. Given enough time, even the deepest scars begin to soften. Historians continue studying military strategy, logistics, and technology. These subjects matter, yet the human experience of the war often survives through simpler memories. Friendship, routine, shared meals, quiet mornings, steady work performed without recognition. Those experiences connected millions of ordinary people across every nation involved in the conflict. As evening approaches, you realize that silence is not the absence of history. Sometimes it is the place where history becomes easiest to remember. Eventually, every night ends. Every watch concludes. Every relief column reaches the trench. And on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918, the guns along much of the Western Front gradually fell silent. Not all at once. Slowly, battery by battery. The armistice did not erase the hardships that had come before it. The trenches remained. The shell craters remained. The memories certainly remained. Yet something fundamental had changed. For the first time in years, many soldiers stood beneath a sky no longer measured by artillery schedules. Some later wrote that the silence felt unfamiliar. Others simply listened. Birds, wind moving through broken trees, the distant sound of church bells, voices no longer interrupted by explosions. The world seemed almost hesitant to believe the fighting had ended. The long work of rebuilding would continue for years. Engineers repaired roads and bridges. Farmers cleared fields of twisted wire and unexploded shells. Families welcomed loved ones home while mourning those who never returned. Communities slowly rediscovered ordinary routines that war had interrupted. Breakfast without hurry, children walking to school, markets reopening, trains carrying passengers instead of soldiers. Peace revealed itself through small habits rather than grand ceremonies. Perhaps that is why so many veterans valued ordinary life above all else after returning home. A quiet evening, a warm fireplace, fresh bread shared with family, rain falling safely upon the roof instead of inside a trench. These simple comforts had always existed. War merely taught people how precious they truly were. Today, preserved trenches, military cemeteries, and museums across Europe invite visitors not simply to remember battles, but to remember people. The engineer repairing a drainage ditch, the cook preparing tea before dawn, the signaller mending broken telephone wire, the stretcher bearer walking patiently through mud, the carrying party delivering fresh bread, the sentry watching the horizon through another long night. History belongs to all of them. As the sun rises gently over peaceful fields where armies once stood, the silence no longer feels empty. It feels complete. It carries the voices of ordinary men whose greatest achievements were often the smallest acts of kindness, endurance, and duty, repeated day after day beneath impossible circumstances. Perhaps that is the lasting lesson of the Western Front. Wars are remembered through battles. Humanity is remembered through the quiet people who endured them. And as the morning light spreads across the landscape one final time, you leave the trenches behind with a deeper understanding that history is not only written by moments of great noise, but also by the countless peaceful moments that followed, allowing the world to breathe once again.